Welcome, Age of Vintage Society. Today we will discuss Tony Curtis's and Marilyn Monroe's relationship, how they met and how Marilyn Monroe tried to force him to marry her, why Tony Curtis was forced to marry Marilyn Monroe. Make sure to watch the video until the end and leave your thoughts in the comments. If you are new here, join our wonderful community by subscribing to the Age of Vintage channel. In a memoir published, Curtis claims that he had an on-set affair with his Some Like It Hot co-star that resulted in her pregnancy. Tony Curtis first met a beautiful starlet named Marilyn Monroe in the autumn of 1948. I'll never forget the moment I first saw her. She was very voluptuous. She had red hair then, tied in a ponytail. Not much makeup. She took my breath away, he recalled. Marilyn Monroe was, like Tony Curtis, new to Hollywood and wanting to be a star, so he offered her a lift in his cheap Buick convertible and drove her to the hotel where she was staying. She gave him her number, but it was a week before he had the courage to ask her out. They then began what he said was his first true love affair. "I never felt like that about a girl before," Curtis said. "I really liked her, and she liked me." After their first few dates, the couple spent the night together at a friend's beach house, and Curtis realized he was falling in love with Monroe. What he hadn't bargained for was that she would so quickly float the idea of them getting married. "It confused me, this whole idea of being married to anyone, let alone Marilyn. Maybe that was because I'd never seen my parents happy together. So I said, 'You know, one day we might get married,' and she said, 'You promise?' And I said, without thinking it through in any way, 'Of course.' We were almost teenagers in love. He in fact was 23 and Monroe 22, and you don't ever get over your first love." His throwaway remark was to come back to haunt him a decade later when the couple met again. It was while filming Billy Wilder's Some Like It Hot in 1958 that Tony Curtis made his infamous remark that shooting a love scene with co-star Marilyn Monroe was like kissing Hitler. But in a memoir, Curtis alleges that the two actors were lovers at the time and that their affair resulted in Monroe's pregnancy, although she later suffered a miscarriage. "My marriage was in a bad state and I had no idea what hers was like, but I had this insane idea that maybe something would happen between us while we were making the movie." In the making of Some Like It Hot, which is due for publication in the US, Curtis alleges that the couple, who enjoyed a brief relationship in 1949, grew close again while on set. When filming began in August 1958, it became apparent the chemistry was as fresh as ever. "When I walked on the set and saw her, I swear to you I was in love with her all over again, and her with me," he recalled. She hadn't forgotten his promise. Both were married at the time, he to Janet Leigh and she to the playwright Arthur Miller. It was, Curtis says, when they were admitting their affair to Miller that Monroe broke the news of her pregnancy. "She kept reminding me that I had said I would marry her when we were both successful. Whenever she smiled at me and said, 'Let's get divorced and then get married,' a little thought went through my head of, 'Yeah, that might be nice.' Then I would remember how miserable marriage had made me and put it out of my mind. But whenever she said it, I always told her, 'Let's wait and see.' And she took that to mean we probably would." He later wondered why he never told her it was never going to happen. "Maybe it's because in some small way I loved the idea that it could happen." He added, "I honestly think I was the kind of guy Marilyn needed at that time. She'd squeeze my hand and say, 'Remember your promise?' She married men who would be her father, but as a lover, what was Miller to her?" Miller wasn't on location, and Monroe was feeling so relaxed that at one point she whispered to Curtis, "Come and see me tonight." In her hotel room, one thing led to another. She told me she loved me and more than anything wanted to have babies with me. That made me feel awkward. My wife was expecting our second child. It wasn't a marriage I wanted to stay in, but I didn't want to get divorced at that time because I thought that was the wrong thing to do. But Marilyn wanted to divorce Arthur Miller if I divorced Janet. Once again, he failed to say no. Maybe I should have, but nobody's perfect, as they say. I was stunned, Curtis writes. I just stood there. The room was so silent that I could hear tires screeching on Santa Monica Boulevard. Events took an unsettling turn when Miller appeared. Curtis suspected Monroe had told her husband about their night together. Then he noticed she looked a little heavier than normal. Shortly afterwards, a newspaper claimed she was pregnant. Curtis says he was told to finish the film and stay away from Miller and Monroe, and it was only after filming had finished that he learned of Monroe's miscarriage. Monroe was so unsettled by the publicity that she was barely able to work. It took 83 takes for one simple shot of her saying through the door, "It's me, sugar." Soon her lines were written on cards and placed all over the set. When Miller confirmed publicly that Marilyn was pregnant, her whole demeanour changed, and so did the atmosphere on set. During yet another endless series of takes by Monroe on one scene, Curtis lost his temper and shoved a glass of ginger ale at her. Miller flew out of his chair at Curtis, who pushed him to the floor and then warded off a furious Monroe. Later that day, Curtis went to see Miller and Monroe in their trailer. "Don't you want to accept my apology?" he asked. "Only if you'll apologise for sleeping with my wife," Miller replied. He also threatened to beat the hell out of Curtis, but Monroe cried, "Stop it, that won't fix it." A bemused Curtis asked what there was to fix. Monroe replied, "I think the baby is yours." It couldn't have been Miller's because he wasn't up to the job anymore, Curtis told his biographer Michael Munn 30 years later. Marilyn made mention to me that he wasn't able to make love to her anymore. During the first week of November 1958, Curtis and Monroe filmed their last scene. She had behaved well all day, and at the end of the day we were on our way to our trailers, and she said, "Tony, I'm having our baby, and now you have to marry me." She was desperate because she wasn't happy. She figured I could make her happy. Curtis insisted he did consider what role he should play in the child's life, but then it was reported in 1958 that she had had a miscarriage. He suspected the baby had been aborted on Miller's orders. Despite the fact that his daughter Jamie Lee had been born just 3 weeks previously, the episode threw Curtis into a depression that contributed to the breakup of his marriage to Lee. It coloured his attitude towards Monroe for the rest of his life. After that he rarely spoke about her, and when he did it was usually with thinly veiled contempt. They loved each other, they talked about marriage, they slept together, but whether they could have actually resolved all that remains unanswered, because it all came to a shattering end when she became pregnant with a child he believed was his. Curtis's marriage to Janet Lee, with whom he had 2 daughters, ended in 1962. In 2002, Curtis told magazine Attitude that when he first arrived in Hollywood in 1948, "I had more action than Mount Vesuvius. Men, women, animals." At an interview at BFI South Bank, Curtis explained the genesis of the "kissing Hitler" remark. Someone said to me, "Hey, what's it like kissing Marilyn?" I said, "It's like kissing Hitler. What are you doing asking me such a stupid question?" "That's where it came from," he said. Monroe and Miller's marriage began in 1956, which dissolved in 1961, a year before the actor's death. Even in death, Tony Curtis was at the heart of a drama, by cutting all 5 children out of his will, igniting a family war. I acknowledge the existence of my children, and have intentionally, and with full knowledge, chosen not to provide for them. Read his will.